Good morning, nerds. Welcome. For some tech news, it's morning call for Wednesday, the 14th of August, 2019, Hump Day once again. So that's a good thing. Yeah. Good morning, Jay Poser. Nice to see you. Always nice for people to chime in on the chat. By the way, I do appreciate that a lot. If you don't know what I'm talking about because you're listening to the podcast, I do this live on Twitch every morning. And sometimes people chime in with weird things, memes, making fun of me. Fun stuff like that. Anyway, let's get into the news because presumably that's what you're here for, not for the fashion advice. So trade war. Topic one, as usual. Trump obviously having his little trade war there with China attacking Huawei. And the Register asked, did Trump just blink in his one-man trade war with China? Because he pushed back. So on September the 1st, all these tariffs are supposed to come into effect, which raised the price of stuff from China basically by 10% in the US. And they just pushed that back to December the 15th for certain things. Cell phones, laptop computers, video game consoles, certain toys, computer monitors, certain items of footwear and clothing. So all the important stuff, as the Register points out, this will give them just enough time, the American public that is, to order all of this in time for Christmas. They have some, the Register says, the climb down should give America's consumer goods market time to panic order stocks ready for Christmas. That's the important thing. So you probably won't be paying those 10% this Christmas in the US, and that's all that matters really. So while Trump says this is all great for the American consumer and is gonna punish China, economists argue, says the Register, although economists argue that all these levies do is push prices up, with the burden falling on buyers rather than sellers. Although, blah, 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 the orange one is determined to push ahead. I like that they call him the orange one in all caps, like he's some kind of Cthulhu, Lovecraftian monster from outer space. Can't piss off the gamers, says Jay Poser. Indeed, Trump knows his base. Good morning, ASCII. Moin moin. Yeah, I don't know. I'm a gamer. I'm not a Trump fan, so don't lump all gamers together, right? That's just not fair. There are good guys among us. Although I'm not hashtag not all gamers. Hashtag not your gamer. I don't know. Although I'm not sure you would call me a good guy. That would push that definition maybe a bit far. But it looks like this is, even though people are saying this doesn't have effect, looks like it has an effect on Huawei. As Heise is reporting, a little bit counterintuitive though, because this is happening in Europe. So Huawei is having actual trouble in Europe. So they between April and June 2019, they only shipped 8.5 million devices instead of 11.1 the over the same period the year before. This is basically because European consumers, Huawei is the second biggest smartphone manufacturer in Europe by sales, just after Samsung, and this is basically down to insecurity of European consumers because, of course, that trade war also means that Google said they won't work for Huawei anymore. So, Huawei needs Android, and Huawei is now, as I reported earlier in the week, doing their own operating system, but European consumers don't really want that. As I kind of predicted a little bit, it'll be okay, in China nobody cares, but in Europe people are like, what? No, I don't want your Chinese probably Android ripoff OS, although I didn't say that legally. I just did not say that. Who knows? But there is insecurity among consumers, which unsurprisingly is pushing Samsung, who is profiting from this in Europe, being the number one, and Huawei being their biggest competitor. But Huawei is not hurting. That is just hurting their European sales, but it is apparently not hurting their global numbers. So even though, even though this is happening in Europe, their global sales are still up and they're still growing. Yeah, I don't know. It's probably because they obviously have very strong sales in China, and also their US sales. So the whole thing with smartphones, with Trump's trade wars, is like it's not hurting them. It's not hurting them that nobody in the US is buying their phones, because their phones weren't on any US carriers anyway. So the only way you could buy them was over Amazon or something as an unlocked device, and that's just, nobody does that. Geeks like us, we do that, but nobody else. So those sales were just, didn't even make a dent in their numbers. So they're not hurting from that. Interesting. Last thing I wanted to say about this is the Huawei CEO, Ren Zhengfei, had a memo that got leaked out to Huawei employees, where he says we will be fighting this. We have to invent us new under these bad circumstances, and we will build an undefeatable iron army that will lead us to victory. But blood and iron. Apparently, the Huawei CEO thinks he's in an actual war, and he fancies himself a bit of a Bismarck. After finishing this memo, he put on his Pickelhaube and went to parade around in the parking lot outside the Huawei headquarters. News story: Apple's under fire. Apple's under fire in the US. There's a class action lawsuit because Apple, this lawsuit alleges, and I mean it's pretty much known, has used AWS, Amazon's AWS, and Microsoft Azure, or like the Americans like to say, Azure, Microsoft Azure, y'all. The storage for iCloud. I mean, we know this. Apple is shit at web stuff. Apple's historically been shit at building social networks and cloud things. So they use other people's, like everybody else, basically. But because their marketing is going, Apple, we're not like these other tech companies. We're all about your privacy and we take care of your data. Shit. I said privacy again. I should really say privacy. If I say Azure, I should also say privacy, shouldn't I? Because over here on this channel, we speak the Queen's English. Speak proper English. Anyway, so they're under fire there. The lawsuit actually recognizes that Apple says that they hold the encryption keys for all that data, so nobody else can access it. These other companies cannot access it. They just store encrypted data there. But the guys who are doing the lawsuit are like, who cares? This doesn't matter. I mean, on one hand, I find it, um, it's kind of, I've, I'm happy that this lawsuit exists because this whole, oh, we are all about privacy. Oh, we are Apple. We take care of your privacy. I find this offensive, and Apple trying to sell us for dumb like that is just stupid. I mean, come on, Apple. The only reason you're not doing all this shit, you're not being Google, and you're not like selling advertising and doing search things, is because you can't. Because you don't have the expertise and you've never been able to figure that shit out. So now you're like, okay, which is actually a good strategy, let's embrace the things we're not good at and just paint those people in a negative light. I mean, there is negative things about the stuff Google and Amazon and stuff do. So we're the good guys. No, well, maybe, but you're only the good guys because you're unable to do what the bad guys are doing. I mean, I don't believe for a second that if you could, you would. You wouldn't. I mean, no way. Anyway, but so I find that kind of hilarious and actually kind of cool that they're now actually being sued for that bullshit. But on the other hand, the lawsuit's just dumb because, I mean, it's encrypted data, right? It doesn't matter where you store it. The point is, if you encrypt it well, I mean, there's like a little sign point. Yes, encryption keys can get out and then somebody can access that. But I mean, that's can also happen if you store it in your own data center. So, we have to assume the encryption is good. Otherwise, all bets are off. If the encryption is good, doesn't matter where you store it. You can store it in the cloud. You can store it on other people's computers. Doesn't matter because it's encrypted. It's kind of in two minds about that lawsuit. Anyway, Facebook. The Register has a story about Facebook, who has a feature that you can turn on in Facebook Messenger, which is kind of like auto transcribe. It's like text to speech. So I guess if you use Messenger for voice calls, I don't know anybody who does that, but okay. Then you can turn that on, and the AI, artificial intelligence, will transcribe your calls. Well, it turns out artificial intelligence is very literal in this case. It was really artificial because the AI couldn't do it in lots of cases. So Facebook was on the hush hush employing contractors who were given voice samples and then just typed it out, so the AI could learn, or basically because I don't know, they had to keep doing it though. So I don't know if the AI really was learning that much. Yeah, so. This, of course, comes after a whole slew of revelations about, Alexa and all these assistants where basically, humans, if you use these AI features and you're talking yourself into, well, it's only computers, nobody will hear the embarrassing shit I tell other people. Well, it's actually not the case because for whatever reasons, diagnostic reasons, improvement, whatever, they always share this with other people who listen to that. Apparently it was anonymized, but still, do you want to people hear that kind of stuff? Well, I won't. I don't want to. Anyway, speaking of Google, if you had some problems in the last month and you were like, oh my God, Google is like, it's not working as well as it should be. Like my searches are not returning the stuff I expect. Then that is because since April, Google was having problems with their indexing. Apparently, they lost part of their index. I actually like this blog post with like, wait, what? What do you mean you lost part of the index? Is that even possible? Then they explain, of course, how everything's like really complicated and shit hard when shit breaks and stuff. Interesting story though, and it had because. Inside Google, everything is based on the search engine and the infrastructure. It had, of course, lots of knock-on effects on other things that broke. I mean, Google News is having problems. People actually reporting on that stuff wasn't indexed there and didn't show up. So should be fixed now. But if you were having problems in the last few months, this is why. From Google, let's move to Microsoft. Microsoft for a long time had various programs that when your employer So when they went to subscription for Office and stuff, they had like these programs to, I think, placate consumers who hate this subscription stuff, which is great for Microsoft because they're basically printing money. I mean, this is the only reason why all software companies are going to a subscription model, because subscription models are great, you know. Learned that from the newspaper industry. Wait, gotta smudge on my screen. Better. Yeah, so when they switched to that, they had this thing where, like, if your employer had an Office license, a bulk license, you could get like a cheap version of Office for like $15, just a standalone version, not a subscription version that you could use on your home computer. Makes sense because lots of people work in a home office nowadays, part time and stuff like that. And they just nixed that program because they want everybody to have subscriptions because it's better. Why the change, says the Register? You won't believe this, but it seems money is at the root of it. Rather than pay $15 for a piece of software that you can use for years, Microsoft's update, in air quotes, will require home users whose employers already have a subscription with Microsoft to pay either $49 or $70 for the personal and home Office 365 services, respectively, every year. Microsoft, like Adobe, loves the subscription model in large part because it enables them to bring in constant revenue, as opposed to people paying once to download software and then using it for 5 to 10 years. Yeah. Microsoft stresses the advantages that subscription has. It gives you 1 terabyte of storage, the ability to use Word, Excel on every device, blah blah blah. But the truth is that it wants everybody to be a paying subscriber rather than a one-off software purchaser. Yeah. Also, like the Register headline on this, let's see what the sweet, kind, new Microsoft that everyone loves is up to. Ah, yes, forcing more Office Home users into annual subscriptions. Well said. In Linux news, the patches for kernel lockdown for the Linux kernel are now in a testing branch and are presumably on their way to the mainline. So this is a thing. This is a security feature that, as far as I can understand it, and I haven't looked into this in detail, it is a way of making sure that running programs can't modify, or that programs can modify the running kernel. And some of it will at some point actually go as far as divorcing the root user, so the permissions that the root user has, which UID 0, from the kernel and its own permissions, so ring 0. A bit like in Windows, where you have administrator users, but that has been for some time now, not specifically those permissions of an. So there's for a long time there was a difference between the actual admin user, so the first admin user on the system, and another user you made admin. That was always like some differences there, but for a long time, the Windows NT kernel has actually different permissions than an administrative user. So ring 0 isn't the same as being admin on the system. And it seems like with these patches, the Linux kernel is on the same path there, which, traditionally UID 0 was just the kernel. I mean, that was it. If you had that, if you were root, you had all permissions on the system, aside from special stuff like the firmware and things like that, chipset stuff, which is beyond ring 0. So now Matthew Garrett is working on that, and he's building it into a Linux security module, which, like SE Linux or AppArmor. Golem has a pretty thorough, interesting story on this, except it doesn't really explain what kernel lockdown is. But if you look that up and then read the story, it's pretty good. And it's gonna be an LSM, like one of these Linux security modules. So presumably you can turn it on or off, like SE Linux or AppArmor, or you can build, your kernel or at install time of the system, basically decide if you want that. It sounds like a cool security feature. There was a discussion about this for a long time. Linus didn't want to build it into the kernel. As far as I understand, basically because when they first, had when they first were talking about these, they had the patches, they had written the patches. It was coupled to Secure Boot, because the people design, creating it were saying, so if you have Secure Boot, if you have a secure boot chain into your operating system, it's a bit stupid if you have all of that and then you get malware on the system and then it can actually modify the kernel. So the thing you would want is for that secure boot chain all the way through that boot up progress to stay secure once the kernel is running. Make sure that no code the user hasn't specifically allowed is messing with these integral system processes. And Linus was against that, and some other people were against it because they were saying, basically, you're saying you only want code to run that the user has control over, but that is not what Secure Boot necessarily is, because Secure Boot obviously depends very much, even with like shim and the stuff the Linux distributions develop, depends very much on manufacturer code, right? So the manufacturer generally, at least that was the idea in the beginning. Before, they had to fight to get even this shim layer in there and stuff. Usually the manufacturer would have control over that, which isn't the same as the user. And so Linus was just objecting to having this both lumped together. And he was saying, I won't even look at this lockdown stuff as long as you predisposing basically this relationship with Secure Boot. And Matthew Garrett, who was at first because he's a big Secure Boot guy, was at first fighting and trying to explain to Linus why he was wrong, has taken over the development now, and they basically decoupled it from Secure Boot. And now at some point it presumably will be in the Linux kernel and you can turn it on. It sounds like a good feature. It actually sounds like to me a better feature than Secure Boot. I've always been a bit skeptical of Secure Boot, probably for the same reason that Linus was, because you're basically handing, by the way it's designed, it's the only way it can happen. You're basically trusting your motherboard manufacturer to secure all of that. And if you ever seen their firmware and their drivers, with the story I talked about yesterday, those motherboard manufacturers, they're writing the shittiest code you can imagine. You don't really want to rely on them, I think. But anyway, I think this is a good thing. And then I have, we've been going on quite long here, but I have one last story before I leave that I found hilarious. So Wired had a story about a hacker who talked at DEF CON about the fact that he thought it was great to get the license plate null. So he has California null, which is great. He was thinking, I need a geeky license plate. What can I do? Segfault maybe. And then he thought, no, let's get null. And then my wife's car can have void. And then our driveway is null and void. I like that. And he also liked that, just the SQL injection potential of null. He thought that was cool. So he registered it. He was actually surprised that it let him register. And he drove around with the plate, and then he had to re-register it. And when he typed it back in, it actually broke the website. Because not only SQL inject, null is this thing in case you're not a programmer. So in generally in databases, there is a difference between having 0 as a data value and null, because 0 means actually you've actually entered data and the data is okay. I put in there that it's either actually zero, you know, or nothing. Null means I haven't put anything in. And there's all these kind of intricate things in programming and in databases where it's like there's actually a difference is if a field is null or zero. There's a difference if a field can accept that thing, and it can break all kinds of stuff. It's kind of like little Bobby tables, you know, drop table stuff, except a bit more intricate. And so he couldn't re-register it because of this, and then he found a way with some reference number or something, so he re-registered it, and at some point he gets like a fine for somebody for not having a kind of sticker on his license plate, and he paid the fine because he thought somebody pulled the sticker off his and put it on another license plate or something like that. It was like, oh, it was like $35. It's okay. I'm gonna pay that. So he also didn't think much of the ticket he got in early 2018 for not having, this is Wyatt, for not having the appropriate registration sticker on his license plate. Tataro, that's the guy, suspects someone scraped it off to use it on their own car. He thought about fighting it, but the fine was $35, so he decided just to pay it and move on with his life. And that was his big mistake. Because at this point, his license plate now got, because he paid, got connected to his personal identifiable information, I guess. And now all these fines started coming into his inbox, like from everywhere. Dozens of them deposited in bulk in his mailbox. Parking violations, stand-stop violations, fines of $35, $60, $74, $80 from Fresno to Rancho Cucamonga. Never been in Fresno, Totaro says. So there's this company called Citation Processing Center which handles all this stuff, and it's apparently their database. So what has happened is his ID was now connected to this null, and so apparently when something happened, when there was a fine and they didn't enter a correct license plate number or something like that, or didn't enter one or something, in the database by default, I guess it would say null. And then when some check ran or something, it would, or when that got saved, it would be connected to the license plate null, the actual one, so his. And now he's got like thousands of dollars just connected to his license plate, and it keeps rolling in. And he talked to the DMV, and they invalidated stuff, but new fines can keep rolling in, and he can't reach the company. And it's like, if you should really, this is great. So if you have some time at work today, read this Wyatt story. It's called "How a Null License Plate Landed One Hacker in Ticket Hell," and they call it like a Kafkaesque development, and it is. The story is hilarious. This is really great. And they